My guest this evening, as I straighten out my Tobias the Owl shirt, we go back a long way. Eclectic Arts started in 2011, and he was someone that had submitted local music to me for review because I had put up an ad on a website, and I wanted to make sure that I was supporting the local folks out there. And I loved his voice and his music as soon as I heard it, and so that early chapter of his music career, I got to see him perform live. I want to say it was 2012. And it was just amazing to me. So we did an interview back in the day as well. And then we actually played music on the same bill. I had a duo that was playing covers at the time. And so I invited him to come play music. And we did that 2 or 3 times at least. But since those early days, his career has grown exponentially. He just released a brand new album this year, which is his best material ever, as far as I'm concerned. And I've heard all of it. And that's saying something because he's put out some really, really quality music. Similar to Dr. Kafalis of Alice, this guest also holds the distinction of being a doctor and has been on the front lines of this pandemic. He just told me pre-show he worked 58 days straight, and now he's got a bit of a break now. But goodness, it is my honor to welcome to the Eclectic Arts virtual studio Tobias the Owl.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for that very kind introduction.
Oh no, thank you. I want to, on behalf of myself and the bands and everyone else, I want to thank you for, being on the front lines and everything that you're doing during this pandemic and extending yourself like that. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, and I gotta say, I really like this tour that you guys are doing. It's like a virtual tour, but it's really imaginative and very creative. And I'm getting to encounter some new talent with it. And Alice is a really stellar band with some fantastic music, so I'm really thrilled to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's been really interesting for me. Obviously, I've never done this many interviews before in my life, let alone in this fashion. So I'm not used to talking to the fourth wall, and it's been an educational experience for me. And just like you said, I've been exposed to so many bands and DJs that I wasn't aware of. And it's been really fun to listen to new music and also see how Alice has put this whole thing together in Steve's house down in LA and convert that whole thing into this club basically. And it's like, wow. So it's just been really just a privilege for me as well. And so let's kind of go back for people, because to me, you have such an interesting background and your education and the things that you do musically and professionally and all that. For those that are watching this and learning about you for the first time, you've lived on 4 different continents, basically, or 4 different countries, I should say. Can you kind of speak to your background?
I'm Moroccan by heritage, and then I grew up in Canada, and I lived in Mexico for a while too. So and the U.S. So that's U.S. is number 4. So 2 continents, but 4 countries.
Okay, all right. And then, like when I met you, I believe you're splitting your time between California and Washington State. So, what brought you to California, I assume, first, and then what brought you up here to Washington?
So I was really, and I really was, and I still am very passionate about indigent care. And so I was really, so I was actually at LA County Hospital for a few years. And that was really a big part of my passion when I was there, just kind of being a doctor full time. And then while I was there, I was diagnosed, I think you know parts of the story, but I was diagnosed with leukemia. And then I actually came up to UW to be on a phase 3 trial as a patient. So especially during this pandemic, it's been a really eye-opening experience. But I think one of the other things that's been sort of interesting for me in my personal journey of healing has been to see both sides of medicine at work, both as a doctor and as a patient.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and I think for, again, people out there that are watching this that know Alice and know Steve, they probably thought, oh, how many times are you going to find someone that's involved with music that's also has a doctor background? It's like, well, no, there's someone right here in front of us. And so when you came up to Washington, and well, maybe let's back up a little bit more. We talked about where you were living, but when did music kind of start for you in terms of like just what you started? Like, I want to grab a guitar and start working on songs. Or what period of timeline was that?
That's a good question. I first picked up the bass, and I was basically just a bass player for many, many years. And then, sadly, because of the chemotherapy and everything that I went through, I developed kind of a bad neuropathy in my fingers. So I can't really, I'm not as really as facile with my right hand as I was. So, so I started playing guitar and I started writing songs more. And really, the catalyst was, getting when I went to go in and get my chemotherapy. I had written this song called "Low Life" that I just played a show the night before, and that was kind of like this bucket list thing was the show that I played. And Jonah Tolchin was the guy that I played the show with that night, and he really dug that song "Low Life," so he started covering it. So, anyways, I was getting my chemotherapy, and over the next few months, I kind of convalesced slowly over time. And in that few month period, Jonah got really big. He got signed to a record label, and he put my song on his record actually. And then once I convalesced, once I healed, I felt like I came out of that with so much more momentum. And because of that, people like Laura Beers and Sheldon Gomberg and Ben Harper have wanted to work with me and trade some songs with me. So I think one of my probably the one inciting event that made me decide to put a lot of effort into music was hearing Jonah cover my song, and it was really the first time ever that I had heard something that I had written that I really liked. Because when you see someone else playing the song, it gives you really a very different perspective on it. And I should say, Mark, that you are one of the few people in the world that have covered one of my songs, and that was also a huge honor to hear you do a cover version of a song that I've written.
Oh no, thank you. It was it's something that we played several times in our live set, and it was just something that really spoke to me and resonated. So I'm like, I want to honor this song and this artist by performing it. So I always have thought highly of your music and you as a person. So having you here is just really extra special for me. And again, here we are all these years later on a virtual tour with Alice. So what I want to talk about too is that um, I remember at one point I talked with you, and I think I don't know if it was the second album, the one before that you did that you just put out. You had written like, I don't know if it was 70 songs or like 80 songs or something. You had told me at one of your shows, and you said, I'm trying to pick the right ones. Am I accurate with that?
Yeah, it was like 120 songs that we and I mean that's kind of how it is for a lot of my records. Like I write about 10 times more songs than I actually record. So a lot of times, you know, so one of these days I'll record all the songs that I've ever written, and that'll be a really interesting experience. But one of the things I like to do is just kind of write in a very expansive kind of wild way, and then just kind of take bits and pieces of things and put them back together. But I would say usually for most records, about 10 or 15% of what I write actually ends up on the album. So I think the album that you're talking about was I Saved Harper for Wayward Echoes, which is the one that we did with Ben Harper.
Yeah.
And we wrote, I think, 120 songs for that, and we only put 10 songs on the album.
Wow. What I'm thinking in my head is that means like when you have some sort of like career box set 20 years from now, they have so many songs to pull from that. Here's an unreleased song. Oh, we have like 500 unreleased songs to put in this box set. Wow, that's amazing to me. And you just mentioned with that second album that Ben Harper got involved. How did you get involved with him?
You know, it's like I said, it was all through Jonah. He was really the catalyst for everything. And I wrote a song called "Low Life," and then Jonah covered it. And then on Jonah's record, when he released it with Deertick, right, which is John McCauley's band. So then Deertick started covering my song. Jonah was covering it. It was They played it at Starbucks stores around the world. And Jonah's producer Sheldon Gomberg, who's a Grammy-winning producer and a really fantastic guy, and he's the bass player actually for Apply for Fighting, and he plays a lot with Ricky Lee Jones, Lucinda Williams, a lot of other great folks. So, anyways, he took a lot of my songs and kind of really dug on them, and he sent some of my songs to Ben Harper, to Laura Beers, to a lot of other people that he knew that he thought would be people who were excited about collaborating with us. And that was, but it all started with Jonah, and he really got my song out there to a lot of people. And to a really wide audience. So the music really took off because of him. And but you know, as much as I love writing and I love recording, one of the real greatest joys has been hearing my songs covered by other people. And that's happened a few times now. You know, Deer Tick, Jonah Tolchin, Ben Harper, and a lot of other local people like Sandy Fernandez, yourself, have covered a few of my songs. That's really truly been a huge honor.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it kind of also shows that how much impact you're having on other people. And I actually talked about that with another guest previously, that sometimes you don't know who's out there and what kind of impact you're having on them, but as long as you're being authentic with what you do and giving your best, then some good things can happen in strange ways sometimes.
Yeah, and I've also been tremendously lucky that the music has resonated with so many people. I kind of feel like I create the song and then it gets out there into the world through its own momentum. And so I'm really lucky that, like I said, that my songs have been embraced by enough people that the music has a momentum to keep going. I'm super grateful for that.
Awesome. Well, hey, I know we have a exclusive clip that you recorded for us in advance. What would you like to say about it before we air it?
So the song is on our record, Visalia, and you'll see in the clip, Ringen Lou, who's a really great local violinist, who's been with me really since the start. He does a great job of playing on it, so big shout out to him for being a performer on this little underground basement version of the song. And as you can see in the song, we're wearing face masks and we're 6 feet apart, so we're respecting the social distancing rule. And I think, we actually had a big debate about whether or not we should release the album with everything that's going on in the world and the pandemic and the lockdown and, our tour getting shut down. And we came to release the record in part because of the messages of this particular song. And it's an album that's really about isolation. So as much as it's sort of been a little unrewarding to put the music out without being able to tour or have shows behind it, it's definitely been equally cathartic for me to hear that the music is resonating with so many people. So even though I feel like I'm in isolation and those people are in isolation, it shows that, there's something really unique about what humanity is going through as a whole. They're all in isolation together. So anyway, so the song is about sort of being lost. And I think the message of the song is that the way you get away from being lost isn't by drifting and wandering further out into the ocean, but by really anchoring yourself to others and making connections with other people. And so that's the take home that I hope people get from listening to this song. It's called Sheets to the Wind, and it's on a record by Celia. And again, we're called Tobias The Owl.
Awesome. So the folks down in Alice headquarters, if you could roll the clip, that would be awesome.
I was sheets to the wind, 1,000 light years to go. I left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold. I was sheets to the wind, 1,000 light years to go. I left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold. Miles underneath, and my numerologies, oh, I could carry a bird to a test apology. I was sheets to the wind, years ago, I left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold. I was seeds to the wind 1,000 light years ago. I left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold. I could float over clouds, constellations call to me. Oh, I'd be dragging my feet over rocky apoggees, and I was seeds to the wind 1,000 light years ago. Left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold. I was seeds to the wind 1,000 light years ago. I left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold. And I'll sing in the afterlife. I will sing in the afterlife. I will sing. And I was seeds to the wind 1,000 light years ago. I left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold. I was seeds to the wind 1,000 light years ago. I left you all of my words, 'cause they were too hard to hold.
Uh, every time I hear you play, sing, it just brings me back to that first time when I heard you. And obviously, and with your everything, you've been playing so many shows. You've been playing at SeaTac and the So Far Seattle series, and doing your own shows. And one thing I would like to express to the folks out there that are watching that aren't here in Seattle, you've been really a pillar in the local Seattle music scene. And I know your acoustic festival that you have in August, and can you please speak to just some of the things that you're involved in here locally, because you're involved with a lot?
Well, I write reviews for Rain City Collective, so shout out to all the folks from Rain City Collective who are hard at work. We've been it's been hard to make content with everything that's been going on in the world. And then the Seattle Acoustic Festival will be coming again. We're going to have it again this year, and we're actually planning it right now. We're putting together a really, really stellar lineup that I'm absolutely super excited about. So I'm really excited for that. And I think we're kind of in a position in the world where we all sort of need something to look forward to. So I'm excited for the Seattle Acoustic Festival, and yeah, I like to foster a lot of creative people. Seattle has so much creative talent that's bubbling to the surface. And if you're out there and you're like not into our music, I would really still encourage you to check out bands that are in your neighborhood. There are so many folks right now who are writing great music that really need your support, really now more than ever. So if you're into supporting the arts, this is really a critical time to express that. And I promise artists are really going to appreciate it. And I can also promise that you're going to really find some music that you really love, whether or not it's our recent record, Visalia, or any of the local artists who are putting out great music right now.
Very well said. I couldn't have said it any better.
Or Alice. Alice is fantastic music.
Yeah, everyone, there's a chance to look into your local music scene, or even like the the particular country that you're at. There's just so much need right now for it, and we have about 6 minutes. I want to make sure that I have time to kind of talk to you about a few things, including the new album that you've been talking about a little bit. What were your themes going into writing Visalia, or all the songs that were going to eventually end up on it?
Good question. The songs I kind of wrote about isolation, and there was specifically a 5-year period of my life that I don't really talk about that often, from the age of around 15 to the age of around 19, where I was homeless and kind of hitchhiking across the U.S. between Houston and LA, and Visalia was kind of the city that I stopped at when that journey was kind of over. And this album came out of kind of my desire to sort of face that period of my life in a way that was sort of recognizing some of the pain that I went through, so I can start the healing process. This all started because Scott Mickelson had asked us to do a compilation record called Blanket the Homeless, which is a benefit for homeless youth. And it's a really fantastic compilation record. And he asked me to contribute a song, which we ended up doing. But before I contributed that song, I wrote like 20 or 30 songs for that compilation record. And I realized that none of them were really any good. And I think it was because I wasn't sort of honestly dealing with a lot of the stuff that had happened to me during that time period. So anyways, so that time period was really thematically about isolation. And I find that when I go to dark places to write songs, even though it feels like I'm experiencing some dark, negative, and isolating emotions, when I find that the songs are resonating with other people, it makes me realize that those dark emotions are really the commonalities of human experience. And I kind of hope that that's what people get when they're listening to the record.
Wow, that's deep. I don't know what else to say about that, but that's because I know when I had a chance to listen to it, which is true, I think, of every music piece that I've heard from you, I love to be able to spin it again and again and again, because there's so many layers to it. It's not something where you get it immediately, or maybe you do, but then if you listen to it more, there's all these other factors that come into your songwriting and your lyrics that make it for such a positive experience in terms of what resonates with me personally. And I think for a lot of other people out there, the music's really clicking for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. We're getting down to a couple minutes here, and one thing I wanted to ask you, which might be true of other folks out there, pre-pandemic, how did you find the balance between doctor life and music life?
Good that you couch that as pre-pandemic, because I definitely do not have a good balance anymore. I think we kind of create in our society kind of this false dichotomy of like, there's the hard sciences and then there's the art, right? And so we kind of separate our intellectual pursuits along that kind of really deep fault line. And it's kind of a shame that we do. I feel like the songs that I've written that have been the most meaningful to me have sometimes been the ones that are about astrophysics, or about, really esoteric concepts that I find to be very beautiful and very moving. We wrote a whole record about the universe as a hologram, which was inspired by Leonard Susskind's lecture on the universe as a hologram. And there's, tremendous, intellectual figures like Richard Feynman, who have really embraced the arts and music along with the sciences. So, and, Alice, their drummer, is also a doctor. So I think it's a shame that we sort of like say, okay, you can either do this or you can do this. And there aren't enough people who embrace the idea that you should really be doing both at the same time. And I think that that's kind of, in some ways, that's the only way that you can actualize yourself as a person, is by saying, and a lot of times my pursuit of medicine is kind of the the pursuit of looking outward, looking at the rest of the world, looking at the sciences. And my pursuit of music is kind of an introspective journey looking inward. But I really think they're complementary in a lot of ways, and one really informs the other. So I think people should be more holistic, and I think that's the answer to finding balance.
All right. Well, hey, Tobias the Owl, thank you so much for taking the time today. I've always been a fan. I will continue to be a fan. Anyone out there that just heard this interview and saw the music clip, hopefully you have a chance to check them out across all social media platforms, Tobias the Owl. And again, my friend, I hope to see you soon somewhere here in Seattle, and hopefully, again, sooner than later. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Mark. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say how fantastic Alice is. They've got some great music. It's a really big and yet ethereal and very symphonic in some ways sound. So I'm really glad to be a part of this this musical expression for them. So thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the band, Alice. And Mark, you've shined a light on so many of my favorite artists, both visual artists and musical artists. So thank you so much for everything that you've done for us and Tobias the Owl, and for so many artists around the region.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks, everybody.